So I'll begin with a refrain that you've heard me sing before, and that is that when we are given these scriptures on a Sunday morning, we're given the scriptures by a committee of some kind, someplace. I don't know if anybody knows where they are. I'd like to know where they are. If you get any evidence of where they might be, I'd like to send them a note. This is a note of about 6-7 pages. The reason I want to do that is that here is an example of yet again where the people who provide for us the lectionary from which it's called the Revised Common Lectionary, and it's the lectionary that everyone among many of the mainstream denominations preaches on a Sunday morning. And there is a lot to be spoken for, a lot of good reasons for having a Revised Common Lectionary. One of the issues I have with it sometimes is that they leave stuff out. They leave stuff out of the Scripture, which makes a difference on the interpretation of the Scripture. And that's challenging to me. One example is the Psalm 89. Psalm 89 is a paean of praise as we read it from the King David. And it goes up here to verse 37, and then verse 38 through about verse 51 or so. You can have a look at this because it gets really interesting after that, after this point, because David is saying to God, okay, now when are you going to do your part? Like, really, David is yelling pretty much at God. He does it in a much more eloquent way than I yell at God sometimes. But and that's really interesting. You know, God is really big and God can take it on those days when you're fussing and you don't understand what's going on and you don't know how to make things work in your head and your heart, and you can't see how this system that God is creating works, and sometimes the anger that you feel boils over. God can handle that because God understands us. God creates us. Very interesting. And another piece that's left out. You know, over in the Holy Gospel, He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And He began to teach them many things. Break. And after He teaches them many things, He realizes that evening has come and that they are very hungry, and there are 5,000 plus individuals. Mark's Gospel says there are 5,000 men, and so we have a feeding of a lot of people, much more than 5,000, because for every man there would have been perhaps another person, either a spouse or a child or multiple in this crowd. So we have the feeding of the, quote, 5,000, and then right after that in Mark's Gospel we have the walking on water story, and then right after the walking on water story we come back with when they had crossed over. That's where we go. So what is it? I'm really curious. What is this that the Revised Common Lectionary Committee want us to tell you today, or to be with you, or to share with you, or to interpret from Scripture? And it's like walking along in a philosophical cloud and having your legs kind of struck from under you. What am I supposed to tell you this morning? That's a real challenge. Last Tuesday night, I have to tell you that I look at it and I think of it as kind of a mistake. And the reason I think of it as a kind of mistake is that it just didn't go the way I wanted to go. But I have always been a fan of James Taylor. So Stephanie and I went to see the James Taylor concert at, was it Van Andel or DeVos? Van Andel, right. The place was full of people, and the first thing that I noticed when I sat down, having so many years in theater, is that we were in what should have been, I think, really good seats. We were on the floor, and we were directly in front of the stage, and yet all the chairs were lined up one behind the other. So that meant that the person who was sitting in front of me would have a person who's sitting in front of that person, and so already we were having trouble. We're not going to be able to see very well, which that complicates matters. And after a while, it becomes a kind of a game, not very amusing game, about well, can I see this way or do I need to do this? Because you know that the person behind you is doing exactly the opposite of what you're doing. So that was the challenge. And then, of course, and I know you've experienced this before in crowds, but then we were sitting down in this beautiful, he was singing this beautiful song called Montana, and directly behind us were two individuals who had had clearly too much to drink, and they decided that they needed to converse almost as loudly as I'm conversing with you now during the course of this song. And the question becomes, what do we do about that? What do we do about that? I know how expensive our tickets were. I know what kind of budget we live on, and that was a treat to go to a James Taylor concert. It was a very special treat. And for 50 years, I've been admiring his music, and I hadn't seen him since I was at the University of North Carolina, and he did a concert there. Hadn't seen him in person for 45 years. And here are these two people back behind me who were drunk and were making a lot of noise. So I turned around and asked them, please, will you please stop talking? And actually, surprised as I was, they agreed to do that. And so for the rest of the concert, it was relatively peaceful, apart from bobbing and weaving. Well, what does this have to do with anything? We have in this scripture passage, the apostles at the beginning. Remember, they've been sent out, and now they're back. And let's be clear what apostles means. Apostles are messengers, but they're more than messengers. They're individuals who have some kind of authority which has been given to them. They're like emissaries in that regard. They are to carry the word of the person from whom they go, or for whom, on behalf, they go. And it takes, given the story that we had last week of John the Baptist losing his head over being a prophet, it takes courage to go out of those days and to do that. And here's where we're going with this. That I really didn't want to turn around and talk to drunk people. I've had experience speaking with drunk people, and that preposition, with, is really not effective. It's not really the right preposition. It should be to. Speaking to drunk people, because when people are drunk, as you know, you can only go so far, and then you can see that your words are smacking up against something that just doesn't penetrate. And I didn't want to turn around and do that. I wanted them to realize that they were speaking all by themselves from the power of my wishing that. But I had to do that, I did. And actually, it took a little bit of courage. But it didn't take the kind of courage that we're talking about here. It took a little bit of courage to go out, or to be, in this instance, someone who's attempting to make peace. Believe it or not. Confrontation to make peace. And there's part of the complexity of the issue. That's part of what we're talking about here. The apostles were tired when they came back, and so Jesus did for them what he did for himself earlier in the Gospel of Mark. He took them to a deserted place for rest and recuperation. Why were they tired? Because they've been out healing and teaching the people. Been out healing and teaching the people. So where are you going to go with this, Jim? Well, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. I think you know. Those persons were given the authority by the grace of God and through the power of Jesus Christ to go out and to do what they can to change the world by healing means, by teaching means. And it's tiring, and it's a part of who they were called to be. And it's a part of who we are called to be. And it's tiring and it's challenging. It's annoying. It's frustrating. Makes you nervous sometimes when you have to confront to find peace. All of these things are what it's about, to go out and to be the person that God is asking us to be. You know, I love this imagery of David living in a cedar-lined palace and God's living in a tent. What are we philosophically living in? What are we philosophically? How are we living in our lives? And how does God rate in your life? I think because you're here, God rates quite highly. And because we take care of this place through the loving hands of Dennis and others, Ron and others. Because we have that kind of care for this place, we have something else to do. And that is to go out and to live our lives in the way that Jesus Christ would teach us and have us do. How does that work? Well, I'm not asking you to go onto the street corner like they do at Berkeley with a Bible in your hand, shouting across the street into the campus of Cal Berkeley. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself to become a martyr for God. I'm not asking you to do that. But I am asking you to do what this doctor does over in Holland. There's a woman doctor over in Holland of whom I'm aware, who every morning before she begins her ministrations to people, she gathers her staff together, and they all take a list. They look at the people who are coming, and they pray for each individual person before that person arrives. Apostle. When you're at work and somebody you know at work needs some kind of care, you have to be careful how you apply yourself to that. But by loving them and praying for them and being concerned about them, they will see in you the apostleship of Jesus Christ by your behavior. And it's tiring. And sometimes you just need to take a break. And I think that's what maybe the lectionary people would have us do. I'm pretty sure that that's what God would have us do. In whatever way you can. Whenever you can. We signed a contract with God.